Hey, Rob, good to see you again. You got the new look, man. Is this the COVID beard and no haircut?
How are you? Nice to see you.
Likewise.
That was a great session.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Mike did a good job putting that together. It's interesting times to be in Surg Ed. So,
Yeah.
hopefully we're finally moving the needle.
Slowly but painfully, right?
Yeah.
So where is the clicker? Is this one?
Yeah, I think I'll sit off, see if there's any questions.
Oh, hey.
Yeah. How are things?
Busy.
Busy? I'm sure you are.
This gavel, and then I just, like I said, now I just have one more presidential address to write for 5 weeks for the ASMBS, and then I'll be good shape. Good shape.
Good.
Still feeling good about the Stacy.
Yeah.
Recess. All right. And we're talking about this.
Oh, we're not gonna finish.
Always push back on obviously any individual status. So, but
We don't give data out. The college doesn't. It was not. They want to sell it. So people want to like, can we give you $1 million for a copy of something? No, the college, no. Wow.
yeah, that's
Okay.
right. So much, not even a money grab.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're going to go ahead and start the next session. If everyone can start to take their seats as we begin the American College of Surgeons session. We're really pleased to have a distinguished panel here to speak with us today. And we're going to go ahead. We have a variety of topics talking on everything from quality efforts, global health initiatives and volunteerism, as well as legislative updates from some of our ACS members that have joined us here as well. And so our first speaker is Dr. Cliff Coe, who really needs no introduction. He is the Director of Division of Research and Optimal Patient Care at the college, and he oversees the quality improvement programs, including those that all of us are involved with MBSA, QIP, the cancer accreditation, and trauma verification as well. And again, you can read the rest of his bio, which is available to you. But I think the most important thing is for us to be able to hear from him today, speaking on quality efforts, volume, and impact, and what to expect moving forward. Thank you very much, Cliff.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Well, good morning, everybody. It's always hard to talk before lunch. It's always hard to talk before kickball. So appreciate you being here. And these are I was telling Peter Angelos that these are my favorite meetings, the regional meetings where it's very collegial, very clinical, it's very relaxed. And so I appreciate the invitation to be here. I changed the title because when somebody gave me the title, I had no idea what it meant. So I just changed it to updates on some quality efforts, what to expect moving forward. And I really wanted to, and then they said there's 12 minutes. So in 12 minutes, what I'd like to do is run through some of the things that I personally think are the important things. So and you all know that I work at UCLA. So when UCLA asks like, what do we need to keep our eye on? How do we get better in our whatever ranking we are trying to go for, or our scores, or our patient care, or anything? What should we do? So that's what I'm going to try to tell you in 12 minutes. So I kind of see the world. A lot of smart people, smarter than I do, see the world as this. There are three components to what we do: three activities, three parts. I'm a colon surgeon. There are three hemorrhoids. There are, three things we should remember in a talk. And so there are three things in this model. We provide our best care possible. That's what everyone in this room does every single day when we're taking care of patients. We do the best that we can. If we had no data, that'd be great, because then we just do the best we can and we really believe it. The data, the second part is we should evaluate our care. So that's done with the registries, our hospital keeps data, there's regulatory metrics, there's all kinds of things, but that lets us know, at least according to these metrics, how good is this care that we give and where the areas are that we can potentially improve upon. And the third piece is conducting improvement. And this, I think, and I've been at the college for over a decade, this is where we don't do as well. We have a lot of things in terms of giving care. We have a lot of education. That was the last session, and then a lot of kind of guidelines. So it was the diverticulitis debate, or the quick shots from early this morning. There's a lot of stuff that we talk about our care. We evaluate a lot. Amongst all of healthcare, we have amongst the most registries in all of healthcare, and amongst the best registries in healthcare in surgery to evaluate our care. Where we fall down is conducting improvement. So what I'd really like to talk about is, in terms of care, some of the ACS quality program updates, some of the things that we're trying to do, and it's along the lines of what a lot of theory and a lot of practice have come together and told us what works best. I'd like to talk about evaluation in terms of what's being evaluated with quality metrics and what is coming down the pike for all of us to keep our eyes on. And then third, I'd like to talk about improvement and four ways that we can improve our improvements. So this is a box of some of the quality programs that the college has. Depending on how you count, clump or split, we have about 20 different quality programs. And in the next year or two, we'll be launching programs in vascular surgery, thoracic, high-risk surgery, which is going to be, I would bet, hepatobiliary, emergency general surgery, and rural surgery. So these are things that are based on the models that the college uses. And the model comes very much and in line with everyone. I think most people have heard of Michael Porter. He's a professor in the Harvard Business School who wrote this book a decade ago, but he calls these things IPUs. And when he heard about the programs that the college has, like the trauma program, the cancer program, the bariatric program, he communicated with the College of Surgeons and said, we are talking about the same thing, these IPUs and your clinical accreditation or verification programs. An IPU is a structurally functional program organized around a clinical focused, and as I said, like those programs that I've listed there. And achieving quality with an organized clinical program ensures, and I know there's a lot of different types of surgeons in the audience, but if you know a clinical program, it ensures that the resources and infrastructure are in place, because we know if there's no resource or infrastructure in place and we're doing things on a dime or less on nights and weekends, it's not sustainable. It has processes supported by the resources and infrastructure. We get to better care and outcomes. It is way more sustainable, and it's a better way of achieving quality than using metrics only. And we know that when we try to target metrics like if we're just told to improve readmission, oh yeah, and by the way, improve CAUTI and improve VAP and improve this, improve that. They're just one thing at a time, and nothing is cohesive in what we do. Having an organized, cohesive program with resources, the processes and pathways in place, and measurement of those outcomes makes way more sense. And he came to it as probably one of the smartest people in the Harvard Business School. The college has come to it through years and decades of experience with our quality programs, trauma, cancer being the two oldest. And by the way, they are celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. Does quality get better with a program? So this is the evaluation part. If we evaluate the quality programs, and this is going to be the trauma one, several years ago, a New England Journal study was published in the New England Journal that shows that for people who are injured, if they go to a formal trauma center versus not a trauma center, the relative risk of dying for all patients, all comers, 0.8. So if you see a car accident, you would, and somebody is an MVA or whatever, you would send them to a trauma center if you want them to get optimal care, and not send them to a non-trauma center. That's inherent. For the most injured patients, you can probably not see well at the bottom. For the highest injury severity scores, they do even better with a relative risk of mortality of 0.7. It's foregone. Like, you just send them to a trauma center. Trauma center has those resources and infrastructure in place, has the people in place, everyone has a job of what they're doing, has data in place so that they continue to improve. That's what a trauma center does. We know this works for bariatric. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the elective mortality rate for bariatric was 7%. Mortality for an elective operation, 7%. Centers were done through the ASMBS and through the college. And what we find is that if you go to a non-center, there's increased mortality at those times. Right now, if you're in a center, you have decreased mortality, decreased complications, increased rescues, and of course, decreased costs. So being in a center just totally makes sense. This program started maybe almost 15 years ago, the breast centers program, and it started with the standards. They did not have a database, but when we later put in measurements to evaluate these metrics of using tamoxifen for HR positive people, chemo for HR negative, radiation for certain, all these types of things, the centers did better than the non-centers. The organized centers, organized programs do better than non-organized programs. And, you know, all of us in our operating rooms, we want it to be as organized as possible. I would rather have my own team in the operating room every week, knowing what I do, than a different person every week. I would like to have my own clinic people be the same every week than different every week. And it just makes total sense. And that's what these things are. The college has a number of these things, and Dr. Hoyt made us make our covers of our books all look the same. So everyone picked their favorite color. And we have all these books for resources and infrastructure and processes in place and the data that you use for these things. So hopefully I've convinced you that organized programs are a way to go. Now, if the college doesn't have an organized program and you do something in your hospital that is not a college program, or you want to try to do it yourself, my uncle, when he was younger, he said, I'm not going to buy a TV. I'm going to build one. Like, oh, okay. He built it. So you can build your own program. It didn't work as well. It only got 2 channels, but you can. And we do see hospitals that build their own organized program. And you can follow a model of, like, who are the people there? What are their roles? Do they have enough resource? The two most difficult resources are people and time. And if you kind of get those things allotted, then I think, you know, you can hopefully build a better TV than more than 2 channels. Now, I'm going to go to the evaluation piece. What to look for in the future. Right now, we have focused primarily on complications, on safety. But the IOM actually 20 years ago had these 6 things. And people hear them all the time and they just kind of blow by them. But increasingly more, when we do an operation, it's not just if we have minimal complications, but are we effectively treating the disease? If somebody comes in for a symptom, Are they relieved of their symptom, and for how long? Do we even measure it? What is the value of it? You know that we're going to value healthcare, timely patient input with PROs, patient-reported outcomes, and then increasingly more equitable. How equitable is our care? How equitable is the access? How equitable are we doing things in the hospital? Do we even know if we're equitable in our care? So those are coming down the pike. Value is a big thing. Probably folks later on in the panel will talk about this. Value is quality over cost. There's many ways to define it, but because there's so many ways to define quality, there's going to be many ways to define value. What I would say for everyone to do is figure out in your local setting how value is being evaluated, how value is being measured. What is the definition of quality? Is it any of those 6 things that I said? Is it VAP? Is it CLABSI? Is it, how much you bill, your RVUs? Is it blah, 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 blah? What is it? So most people, quality care and outcomes that matter to the patient, and the cost is, well, how much does it cost to get to there? One of the big value drivers or value examples is the bundled program. So people may have heard of BPCIs, the bundled payment for care improvement. This is a demonstration project of CMS. And I think most everyone's probably familiar with bundled care, so I'll go through this. Maybe first, if there are residents, and the residents probably all left to go warm up for kickball. But what we're doing is, thank you, Ronnie. I have $5 right here. Hold on. So each one of these lines is a hospital. Each one of these colors, which you cannot see on this slide, I'm sorry, is something in the hospital. So the blue is the inpatient care, and you can see that that green line is how much each, and I think this is for hip replacements. This is all hip replacements for a year at a hospital. And you can see that the costs range from below the line to above the line. This hospital gets paid $19,974 for every hip that they do. So clearly, if you do something for $15,000, you make $4,000 for every hip. For anything above that green line is going to be, you're going to lose money. What are the colors? The index admits, the pro fees, readmission, home health, things like that. It's the post-acute. Everyone always talks about post-acute care. This is an example where post-acute care does cost more. And these are the things above the line here. And the idea is like, how do we minimize the red? How do we optimize the green? Quality. It is through standardization. It is through identifying the things that are going to bite you, kind of getting them beforehand and not think about them afterwards. So there are some things like material and device selection. Don't use the most expensive hip if you don't have to, but preoperative optimization, protocols, decreasing complications, find your opportunities to improve and improve them. These are coming down the pike to have value, quality over cost, and it's going to be the quality piece as well as the cost piece that you want to maximize the quality, minimize the cost to the cent. And in California, we had a decade ago where we did these things where it was a bundle without quality. So people just were kicked out of the hospital. So we don't have that anymore. We're going to have quality metrics to make sure that doesn't happen now. But this is probably coming down the pike in various iterations in your place, and people are making some money. This is out of a hospital out of Northern California who did this for colon, and they actually made $1 million the first year they did it because they really kind of honed in on what's happening. You could see here that the ones above the red is readmission. That funny color green is long-term care. So identifying those patients to do those things. A lot of these things are the frail elderly. So I know that there's some frail elderly talks here. The college has a geriatric surgery program that identifies how can you identify a frail elderly? What is it that we need to do beforehand to minimize how their effects of their frailty is going to lead to a readmission or long-term care. Evaluation. The last thing I'm going to say is this. Look at your own data regularly. Put it in your kind of calendar and just whatever it is, every month, every quarter, look at your own data for yourself and your group or your division or your department regularly. We have a program where we visit hospitals to help them with their quality. And people say, oh, we need more data. We need more data. I can't do quality unless I have more data. And they already have a ton of data. Our hospitals have a ton of data. Our systems have a ton of data. But then when we ask like, well, what do you do with the data you have? Like nothing. And there are important things that we have. Now, not all the data are good, but there are some good things in the data that everyone has. Last thing is improvement. I'll talk about very quickly 4 things in the last 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Oh, I'm over 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna talk even, I'm gonna talk even faster. 4 things, just very quickly. QVP is the Quality Verification Program, Framework, QI course, and the Quality Conference. We have a new program called the Quality Verification Program. We know in the college, and I kind of tried to tell you that a comprehensive program that looks at resources and structure, infrastructure, and the processes and data to do it is better. Now we've developed a program all about quality using those same things. Does a hospital or does a surgery department have the resources and infrastructure to do high quality care and high quality improvements? And when we go around hospitals now, there are some that do, some that don't, or some that are very disorganized. So that's what the QVP is. I won't go into the details here. Look on the website. It is, if you are in NSQIP, we'll visit your hospital and verify you as part of NSQIP. We're joining it to NSQIP over the next year or so. But it is a program that helps you identify and helps us tell the leadership of the hospitals, like, you can't have quality unless you have people and time helping you do that. And you have you're having people do it on nights and weekends, and that's not enough. So the QVP, quality verification, these are some of the hospitals that we've worked with to do that. If there are residents in the room and you have to do a quality improvement project because the ACGME and others think you should, but it's also very important to do that. We know that most quality improvement efforts that are conducted are terrible, like a solid F. I am a total dove when I give the boards and when I test every student at UCLA gets a 94% from me. I am the softest person. People doing quality improvement projects get a 38%. I can't have that be passing. That is a total F. We developed a framework to help people on the front lines do quality improvement efforts. And it's for a colon surgeon who thinks of only 3 hemorrhoids and that's it. So this is very simple, straightforward, and easy to use. This will be published in JAMA Surgery, but we will have stuff out very soon to explain how, in a very easy way, to do improvement efforts to do them. There's a quality improvement course that we developed as soon as we figured out that improvement efforts are not so good. There's too many quality improvement courses out there, nothing really for the frontline person doing them. You have to have a PhD almost in quality to do it and spend your whole life doing it and blah, 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 blah. But can we do it as a surgeon who operates most of the time and take care of patients most of the time, but still want to do and have to do improvement? So that's what this is. Lillian Cow and Rachel Kells, Bridget and other folks developed this. You can do it in person, but I would say online self-paced is much better. And finally, if you're not doing nothing in July and want to come to Chicago, hopefully it won't be too hot and humid, there's the Quality Safety Conference. There's usually about 2,500 people there from all of our quality programs sharing all their pearls and wisdoms and challenges and how to overcome the challenges in quality improvement. And it's in the middle of July in Chicago. So I'm going to end here. Thanks very much. All of this is on the website, and or email me directly. I'm happy to answer the email or call you. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. I don't need to stop the clapping, but you don't have to. I have to run to the airport. So if you really have any questions, a lot of stuff is on the website, or feel free to contact me. So Jenny, thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. I'm sorry I have to run.
Thank you, Cliff, for taking time out of your busy schedule to share with us. So this session was put together by Program Committee Chair, Dr. Grover, and I, and the themes are really passionate about the themes that I'm passionate about. Came in as Vice Chair of Quality before I was promoted to Chair, care about moving the needle on that. I also care about volunteerism and giving back in that sense, and also about local legislative efforts. And so that's really what we're covering here today. So if I said the word Operation Giving Back, raise your hand if you know exactly what that instantly what I'm talking about. All right, so not everybody. So this is still an opportunity for education. Gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Tefera, who will be speaking to us on this topic. He is a vascular surgeon at the University of Wisconsin, and he serves as chair of the Division of Vascular Surgery and vice chair of global surgery for the Department of Surgery there. But today he's going to be speaking to us wearing his hat on behalf of the American College of Surgeons on Operation Giving Back and seeing what opportunities we have to work, partner with the college with this. So with that, Dr. Tefera, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to get me out of Wisconsin cold. So it's really nice to be in this environment where I have hopefully an opportunity to recruit some more of you to actually work with me. My goal today is to cover three things. One is really understand a little bit about the dimensions of health. And, when Cliff talks, you can see how much stuff is transactional, right? There is so much we have to measure and so much to actually in the US that we spend on. And however, we really forget the essence of what health is. And I just have a few slides to talk about it also because as surgeons, particularly living in this society, we are not reminded about, all the different dimensions of health. And then I want to say a few things about history of OGB and some of the current programs. And then of course, at the end, how we should engage you and you engage with us. So I just want to see a show of hands. How many are familiar with this chart? Very, very few people, right? So this is a chart from actually the United Nations, that in the first part of since 2000 until 2015, they have what they call the Millennium Development Goals. And then since 2015, they have what they call the Sustainable Development Goals. So these goals are basically meant to create a blueprint, to bring peace and prosperity and good health to the world population in general, right? So it has a lot of elements in this. And the centerpiece is really, at some point, if you look this in a circular image, actually you will see health is probably in the middle, and that health and well-being is probably the goal number 3. And there are 17 goals, all very, very important and critical goals. And, we're not going to go over them, but we'll touch a couple of them because, when we talk about health, we have to really understand how this all comes together. At some point, the first piece that they want to tackle is really extreme poverty. So, as it's no brainer to understand poverty is actually one of the biggest challenges that the world populations have. And although in the US, we don't really see it or feel it that way, but you can see in 2015, about 750 million people lived with less than $2 a day. Imagine that. And actually now in time of COVID, there is probably anywhere between 150, 200, so from 120 to 150 million people were pushed back into that kind of poverty. So with people with that kind of extreme poverty, how can they even think about their health, right? So poor health and extreme poverty go hand in hand. And so it makes sense to really think about whenever we go with our outreach programs to think about this, that poverty is actually one of the problems, the main problems. And what we have been trying to do is end poverty by providing charity. And there was a nice quote from the leader of Ghana recently who said, no country has become rich depending on charity, right? So, and it's clear it can never be. And in fact, things have really gotten worse over the past several decades. Actually, the culture of dependency is setting in most of the sub-Saharan African countries. And yes, part of it is because of the governance, the politics, and the injustices that happens there. But most of it is actually interconnected. In this global world, there is nothing a population in Ethiopia or a population in Kenya can control. It's actually a globally controlled environment. So charity is part of the problem actually right now. And in fact, for those of you who want to read more, just read about this book. This book, gives you a clear idea and understanding how actually charitable donations have been going up, but 7 in 10 Africans are at the brink of going into a complete extreme poverty. So something is not working, right? So something is not working, and we have to really think about, we can't keep people on, continuously in the ICU kind of thing, on a CPR, and giving them all these extensions of life. So some thinking about sustainability is very important. Another piece that we forget is education in general. Education in general is a big problem because millions and millions of kids are out of school. And most likely women are to be out of school actually. So I read this point because you need to think about these dimensions if you are engaged in volunteerism and humanitarian work, because unless you think about all these components, it's not going to work. When it comes to the Sustainable Development Goal number 3, which is good health and well-being, there's a lot of health-related thing that shows up in there. And one point that is really important to remember is there is about 18 million more healthcare workers are needed. 18 million. And then when you look at the distribution now, what you see is, in the Americas where the disease burden is about 10%, 37% of the healthcare workers are in the Americas. If you go and look at Africa, for example, where the disease burden is 25%, there is only 3% of healthcare workers. So that disparity, at some point, we need to think about it. Because without, healthcare worker shortage is everywhere, so it's really a global problem. So I think that global problem has to be solved together, with the high income and low income countries. And so training people, developing surgeons and teaching students has to really become one of the centerpiece of what we think. So that said, we just, those slides were just to remind you, global surgery is not always about surgery, and global health is not always about healthcare. It's really a lot more, bigger dimension. And unless we think about it with an idea of the Marshall Plan kind of idea for global health, I don't think we're going to solve this issue, because we have created an incredible amount of dependency. And one thing that was really critical for the Marshall Plan, for those of you who know about it after Second World War, is that they basically spent money on infrastructure. And that's why the European countries were able to get their acts together and move back into business, right? But in many of the global health work we do, it's to prevent, for example, catastrophic failure from AIDS pandemic so that the developed countries can keep their economic standards, right? Or global health is because we want to keep Ebola out there. We don't want Ebola to come here. So this disease specific or pandemic specific or protecting ourselves kind of thing is not going to get us really in the long run in a sustainable, environment. Operation Giving Back, and its creation and foundation was back in 2004. It was started at that time, I think, by Dr. Warshau from from Harvard, who was leading the committee. This was based on a survey that was done amongst fellows of the college, and there was tremendous enthusiasm and people wanting to go and provide volunteerism and humanitarian work. And that's how it was started. And the picture you see up top on the right-hand side is Kathleen Casey, who was the first director who served for 10 years, and I took over from her. The images below are really people who show what this volunteerism and humanitarian work is. And this is actually a moment we celebrate every clinical congress. So I have this slide up to show you the mission, yes, but also to tell you there is really a lot of surgeons who are doing an amazing amount of work. Please identify them, nominate them so that they can be recognized. If there are people who are engaged in many years of service, and we take care of that through Operation Giving Back program. Operation Giving Back has domestic and international activities. So the domestic part is actually the hardest because you can't just pick up your bag and go and volunteer in another state because there are so many rules that are liability issues. And I think, through the office or the Division of Advocacy, some activities have happened in the past, and I hope will continue to a point where the Good Samaritan law can be passed so that in cases of disaster, we can just cross borders and take care of patients. I have here the two activities where you can participate. One is this Health Career Collaborative. It's really a teaching program in urban centers where there are some medical schools to teach minority kids in underprivileged communities about healthcare. It can be about nursing, about surgeons, what radiologists do, so that these kids can really be educated and make some choices as they grow up, or have some role models that they can. So it is not really an expensive undertaking, and this is championed by a lot of surgeons. When we started this together with the two individuals who initiated the program, Barry Mann and Liana Gifford, there were only 6 or 7 places. Now there is over 20 cities where this activity is happening. And I can really go over that later on if there are people who want to sponsor an activity like that. They have curriculums. I mean, it's really a very incredibly successful program. The second program we have domestically is in Puerto Rico, where we are engaging surgeons who want to go and provide clinical service to uninsured and also immigrants who are undocumented and who have no insurance. Together with that, there is also a lot of partnership with what we call the H. Maria Inc. This is H. Maria is because this organization was created after the Hurricane Maria. We do sponsored programs to educate residents, mentor and educate medical students as well. And so there is a mentoring program and a cyber lecture series that goes on continuously. So there is really a lot of activities around that where I can also share with you on that. From the international perspective, there is really a lot of things happening. And in one survey, this is what happened. So there is people going everywhere. The larger the size of the name of the country, the more people go there. And however, imagine everybody also working in silos. So they will go to, from even the same institution, you would not know if somebody else is going to the same place where you have been last year. The other problem we saw is that you go 1 week or 10 days in a year and you cannot change much, right? You go back after a year, you take care of your 10 people, your 20, 100 people, you come back. And so because of that, we really, wanted to really see, okay, that really, feels good, but what can we do beyond that, right? So we need to think about creating some kind of a sustainable thing. Imagine if we can bring a lot of people, academic institutions, volunteer surgeons, all, in one space, geographically, strategically chosen place, where education can happen continuously, where we can impact actually the region, rather than just one institution. And so we wanted to pilot that, and we were successful in piloting in the sub-Saharan region, in the southern part of Ethiopia, where we identify a medical school and a big, actually, university. And for this pilot, there were 13 US academic institutions that raised their hands, plus a lot of actually volunteer surgeons who came and joined us. And we had been having continuous presence since then. And this model successfully actually got a lot of things done in 1 year, to a point where we are assembling a second cohort of institutions from the US and individual surgeons. And you are all welcome to participate in this, where we are starting hub number 2 in Zambia, Lusaka. This way we have a hub up in the northern part of East Africa, and then a second one in the southern part of East Africa. So where teaching can really reach out to the regions. You know, Zambia is close to Malawi, Zambia is close to Namibia and Zimbabwe. And the third hub is happening in Kigali, in Rwanda, where it is specialty focused. So if you are interested, particularly in cardiothoracic, vascular, or trauma and plastic maxillofacial, just talk to me, because this is going to be a specialty focused place where we can really do great work. So this partnership collaborative is really coming up with sustainable programs. So I don't want to take 5 minutes more like Cliff, but I think I just want to leave here, just show you a slide. My number is there. We have an email address there. I just want to thank Miranda Malone, who is actually the coordinator, who's keeping everything together for me. But you know, you don't need much to participate, really. You just can just contact with that. The one thing we want you to do is probably attend one of the Global Health for Surgeons course, just to have a little bit of that global health ethics and cultural awareness course, so that you can be kind of ready for it, but you can really never be ready with one course. But there is a lot of experienced individuals who can really show you the way. So I'll stop here, and I thank you very much for inviting me, and I'll be available for questions here or later on if you want to engage with me at some point. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that update. Just curious, raise your hand if you've been involved in some kind of volunteer efforts, either locally or overseas. That's great to see. Okay. All right. All right. It's a pleasure to introduce a dear friend of mine, Dr. Ross Goldberg, who is going to be speaking next. He is Associate Professor of Surgery at both Creighton and the University of Arizona here in Phoenix. He's obviously very active in health policy and advocacy at all levels, local, state, and federal. For the last 2 decades, he's vice chair, serves as vice chair for the advocacy pillar for the college, and he's the chair of the ACS Health Policy Advisory Council and sits on the ACS Health Policy and Advisory Group as well. Dr. Flip-flop, boss, apologize for that. We're going to start with Dr. Bailey. Awesome. All right. Well, I apologize for that. Dr. Bailey is Chief of Pediatric Surgery at Maricopa Medical Center here in Phoenix. He serves as the Vice Chair of the American College of Surgeons Professional Association Political Action Committee and is a member of the ACS Health Policy and Advocacy Group as well. In the process of completing a Master's of Legal Studies at the Arizona State University as well, which is pretty amazing feat. Dr. Bailey.
Well, Ross and I are happy to be here as the 2 Arizonans here today on the panel. I've been here for 16 years and he's been here for now about 10, and we definitely call it home. Since we're going to talk a little bit about politics today, it's become fashionable and almost necessary, I think, to out yourself at the beginning of these talks. And so one of the great things that I love about Arizona is that Arizona allows you to register as a non-committed voter to vote either way. And I stand before you as a proud no preference voter in Arizona. So with that disclaimer out of the way, what Dr. Turner asked us to talk about was what you can do to engage in our advocacy efforts out of the DC office. And there's no person better to describe what he has done than Ross with some of his activities here with ARMA and with the college. So that's the topic for my part of the talk here today, and he will follow on. So some of you know that we had a big campaign out of the DC office last year to try to mitigate the cuts. Actually, that was the second year that we had a campaign, 2020 and 2021. Both of those have been successful, different degrees of success, but these would not have been successful if there had not been a collective effort of the Surgical Coalition and the Surgical Care Coalition. I'll explain the difference there. Surgical Coalition is all the different surgical societies nationally that meet regularly, that Christian Schaugen in our office leads their efforts. The Surgical Care Coalition is a subset of that group that contributed significant amounts of dollars, 6 figures plus, toward this media campaign that we had this past year that enabled us to mitigate what would have been a 9% cut to only a 2% cut. So in follow-up to that campaign, we ran a survey. We asked people what they thought about the campaign. We asked them what concerns that they had. And Dr. Turner got back some feedback from a couple of fellows that expressed some concerns about two things. And those are the two things that I want to address with you today. The impersonal nature of the responses that people got back from their legislators when they replied to them, specifically that they were addressed to Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. and not doctor, and also that it just seemed to be boilerplate template language. And then there was also some concerns expressed about the partisan nature of the content in some of those responses that folks received. So I think it's important to know what the real purpose is. When we send out an action alert out of the DC office, it's really important to know what the purpose of that is. And it's literally to check the box. We want you to tally something with your email on the sheet in your legislator's office. And I'll give you a personal example of that. I was in DC doing a Hill visit with one of our lobbyists, and there was a situation going on with one of my senators here in Arizona that I didn't think that he should be doing what he was doing. And we were in the Russell building, and so I stopped by his office, pulled out my driver's license, showed it to the young man at the front there, and said, "Hey, I'm from Arizona, and I urge you to urge Senator to stop taking this action." And he literally, I saw him stop and take a pen, and he flipped over to the right sheet and he put a check in the box for somebody who had stopped by to make their opinion heard. That's what the purpose is of you sending one of these email alerts that we see. All of our legislators, they've got one or two primary objectives. They will tell you their primary objective is to serve you. The somewhat cynical view of that is that their primary objective is to get reelected. Okay, they like their jobs, they want to stay there. And to do that, they have to be responsive to you. We want to get their attention. Sometimes they're slow learners, and that's the reason people frequently ask me, Pat, how often should I be sending? Should I be responding to this? Once a week is not unusual. Once a week is not unheard of. Once every 2 weeks, certainly not. So we want you to do it over and over again, just to help us get their attention so that they know that somebody who they represent is being impacted by an issue that we want movement on. So with regard to the impersonal nature of the messages you receive on Surgeon's Voice, when you go there responding to one of our action alerts, and literally we've gotten it down to where it takes 3 clicks, and you don't have to modify it at all. But if you want to modify it, you can modify that message infinitely, ever how you want to do it. Similarly, the message that you're getting back in reply is going to be standardized. You should expect that. And if it says Mr. or Ms. or Mrs., that's not a sign of disrespect. It's just a sign of the volume that they're responding to. All this is electronically now. The old fashioned way of sending something through the mail paper, those messages go somewhere out in Virginia where they have to be screened for anthrax before they make it into Capitol Hill. So this is all through electronic means. And the volume of their correspondence every day out of that office is immense. Just by the virtue of the fact that you get this electronic reply back, that you've served the purpose. You've gotten their attention. They're acknowledging to you that the ends of the action that we sought were accomplished. with regards to the partisan messaging, and this is something that we struggle with every day in the DC office, and it's becoming even more and more symptomatic, problematic as we go forward in these hyper-partisan times. We've got to be able to separate our personal and our professional political agendas. And I can't emphasize that to you more. We all have a personal agenda, but we all also have to have a professional agenda to take care of our patients and to take care of our profession. And I would like to tell you that I think the hyper-partisan nature of what we're dealing with right now is going to go away soon, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think it's going to. So we have to engage with every one of our senators and our representative, regardless of whether we personally support them or not. I'm going to tell you a story in a minute about Ross and I share the same representative and how we have dealt with some difficult issues in that regard. But you have to engage with them. Our political identity is at the core of our person. I get that. And when you have represented by somebody who frequently does things that conflicts with your personal beliefs, or who has a political persona that's challenging, shall we say, that can make it hard. But we have a responsibility to our patients, and we have a responsibility to our profession to do this, to engage with them. So what I'm going to ask you to do is develop some brutally objective pragmatism. And I know it's hard, but again, we've got to act in this way. When we send out these messages, we need for you to take action so that we can help protect our patients, so we can help protect our profession, so that we can go on doing what it is that we all love to do. And I would just ask that you not be offended when you get a message back from somebody that represents you that takes the opportunity of responding to you to take a political cheap shot at some position that you may or may not agree with. That's just the nature of what they do. They're politicians. So our ask, my ask, the DC office's ask, the college's ask, is that you build a relationship with your representative and your senators. We want you to become the person that they think of to call whenever they have a healthcare related issue or a healthcare related question. This is not something that just is an advocacy summit activity every spring. This is something that you engage with in year round in district. And in fact, I will tell you that the more rewarding meetings that I have with my representatives and senators are in the district office, because they've got more time, they're not as rushed, they're not as distracted. And so it's a year-round effort. And we would encourage you to use that opportunity to get to know their district staff, because those are the people that are their eyes and ears. Respond to our grassroots alerts. Please don't hesitate to respond to them, as I said, multiple times. It's very, very important to do that. Get their attention, stay on their radar screen, make more checks in the box. And then finally, give to the PAC. The PAC's had a rough couple of years. I'm not going to lie to you. We maxed out at about 4%. We're down to less than 1% now. And we really need your support to help us be able to have the opportunity to get in the room with these folks and have these conversations so that we can try to protect our profession, try to do the right thing for our patients. So I'll give you a quick little update here about what Ross and I have done with our congressman, then I'll turn it over to him to talk about some more state and local issues. We live in the same district. We've got the same congressman. We have a different political identity and ideology. My reason for not being particularly supportive of my congressman is that a few years ago, I met with his staff and they told me that he didn't vote for something because he didn't support the children's health insurance program. Well, you tell a pediatric surgeon you don't support the children's health insurance program, that's probably not going to win you a lot of points. But yet, he's my representative. I have to engage with him. I visit with him in DC and in Arizona, as does Ross. We both engage with their staff. Ross has got a first name basis with a couple of his staff now, and we focus on that professional political agenda. And I think that's what's important. So with that, I will turn it over to Ross and talk to you a little bit more about state and local.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and I appreciate it. It was a nice drive for me to come over from work. So thanks for getting me out of the hospital for a little bit. I have no slides, which is unusual for me when it comes to giving one of these talks. So I'm going to try something different and really build off what Pat was talking about putting your personal and professional agendas and separating them. So again, full disclosure, I'm a moderate. I am probably a little more fiscally conservative and socially liberal. I am a registered member of the Democratic Party. I live in Arizona. As a registered member of the Democratic Party, which Arizona is known to be on the more redder side of things, usually. I've lived here for 10 years and been engaged with local politics that entire time. I have good relationships on both sides of the aisle. I'll start with our congressman, who is not a Democrat. He is Republican. I have met with him in his office multiple times for 10 years. I will go so far as that we really don't probably have a lot of same viewpoints politically across the board. I'll even go further by saying I was recruited 5 years ago to potentially run against him for his seat in Congress. So he and I are on different sides of the aisle, but he is my representative. And I have met with his office multiple times representing the college, the AMA, SSAT, SAGES, you can name an organization, because he is my representative in Congress. He's going to be voting on these issues, and it's important he hears what, from me as a constituent, what needs to happen. I have worked so far as that I actually sat on one of his Facebook Live groups as a panelist to talk about technology and medicine. Again, he and I probably are not going to go out together and have dinner to talk about things, but he is my representative, and I want him to realize that I have a voice, and I want him to hear what I have to say representing my profession. And so I go and meet with him frequently. In fact, I owe them an email actually now. And yes, it's actually Chad Michaels is my buddy, the Health LA over there. He and I go back and forth, but we have such a good working relationship that literally I email him and go, do you have 10 minutes so we can chat? He's like, no problem. We figure out a time. We talk about the issues and we can go our merry way. There's none of this awkward, well, let me introduce myself to you. We know each other. It doesn't matter what party I'm registered to. I'm one of his constituents, so they want to hear what I have to say. Let's take a step back and talk about the lovely state of Arizona, which is one of the more interesting places to live on the planet. One role I had during recently, as Pat had alluded to, is I was the president of the Arizona Medical Association from April 2020 to April 2021. That timeframe may sound familiar. So yes, my presidency was for the first year of the COVID pandemic. So that's what I got dropped into to represent the largest state professional medical association in the state and have to integrate with and interact with our state government the entire time during that pandemic. I will tell you that, Arizona got notoriety, not for good reasons. Around July of 2021, we were literally the worst place on the planet when it came to COVID due to our rates and the hotspots and everything going on. But I was still interacting. Every week I met with the Department of Health Services. I had access to the governor's office. And again, Governor Ducey is not a Democrat, and I am not a registered Republican, but I had to work with our leadership to try to figure out how to deal with this. And I will tell you, regardless of my personal politics, he at least listened to what I had to say on these issues representing physicians in the state of Arizona. Did not make it personal, stuck with the science. But I know for a fact there were others, they would send things in and they would get thrown into the trash bin. I knew when I reached out to his office that he got what I wrote. Some of it appeared in the Associated Press and private letters I sent him about certain issues, but they at least listened and heard what we had to say. Did he always agree with me? No. At times they tell me to stop asking certain questions. Yes, behind closed doors, but never once did I was I ignored when I had an issue with something. And I'll take it even farther. Last year, we passed one of the more comprehensive telehealth bills in the country. We have pay parity for audiovisual. We have pay parity for a good number of audio. There is a commission that was formed to oversee everything and provide guidance and feedback to our state House, Senate, and to the governor's office on the evolution of telehealth in the state. I was asked from the very beginning in my role to help write that bill. So we got called to the governor's office November of 2020, and we sat down and started to come up with the bill. The commission actually is something I really pushed for because I wanted guardrails. And wouldn't you know it, after we got the bill passed, and by the way, there were times when we had issues with the insurance companies. Surprise, surprise, we disagreed about things. But when I had an issue and I brought it up, I immediately got meetings with the governor's office, with the Republican legislators who were writing the bill, and they would sit and meet with me to talk about my concerns and alleviate any issues I had over certain things. It went so far as something happened on a Saturday. I literally told our lobbyists, and I'm going to quote here, I'm really pissed. I want to have a conversation about this. I had a meeting Monday morning with the governor's office. They set it up on a Saturday. They said I was upset. They used my name. And we had a meeting on Monday to talk about it. And after a half hour, we got our issues settled out. But we were able to have significant impact. And to go even further, after this commission got formed, the governor appointed me to it. Now, meanwhile, you should always be wary when that happens, because I learned as I signed the document, it's an 8-year term, which is not what I signed up for initially, but that's what I'm on now. But my Republican governor, and you have to register what party you are when you sign up for these things. So publicly and willingly put a Democrat member of his state on a commission that reports to the governor's office. So it can be done regardless of what political party you are, because you realize that we're going to have different opinions. It's what's good for the profession. And that's important. We have had continuous impact. I am able to talk to members of my House and Senate that I do not agree with. Some have a hard grasp of understanding what science is. It makes it interesting when they sit on the health committees in the House and the Senate, but I still engage with them every time to find common ground, to work with them, regardless of what aisle they sit on. And just to show you, I'm not all talking about the other side of the aisle. Another example on the Democratic side, there's a Congressman, Greg Stanton, who's the former mayor of Phoenix. He's in the district over from me. He somehow got my cell phone number, which makes me a little worried because I have a 917 number from New York, but it's fine. Called me last year. He wanted to sit and meet and start building a conversation and a relationship. We sat for an hour, talked about prior authorization, other issues. Now he texts me. He texts me a Happy New Year. When there was an issue with, I needed him to look at a letter, I texted him. He called me a few weeks ago because obviously he's in campaign mode now. So he's like, hey, can you be supportive? What can I do? So, but we now have a working relationship. So it works on both sides of the aisle. And I think what's important to remember from all of this is that I have my own personal agenda about lots of things. I mean, those who know me in this audience knows I am not shy about expressing my opinion, and my opinions are pretty strongly held. And as a surgeon, I know I'm right all the time. So you put all that together, it makes it interesting to interact with politicians who have different agendas. But again, when I go, I represent the organizations I'm speaking on behalf of, and that's a different issue that we're talking about. And it's hard for people to separate that out. I remember from my time from the PAC board, we used to laugh, pick a side. People were either upset that people were giving to Nancy Pelosi or giving to John Boehner. Well, I hate to break it to you. If they're the Speaker of the House and the majority leader of their party, we have to interact with them. You need to work with both sides. You do not get anything done by talking to one party. You've got to talk to everyone. And believe it or not, compromise is not a dirty word. I know it's super hyper partisan right now. Even now in this state, which is very, very riled up right now, they're literally, I got an email about bills that are going to the governor's office as we speak to make sure no one can ever do a mandate ever again on any public health issue, because that's the state I live in. And that's how riled up they are about it. But I will still continue to work with them to try to bring some calmness and perspective from the healthcare side. We have a lot more credibility than members of Congress. We have a lot more credibility than most legislators because of what we do every day. It's an advantage to go talk to them, and you have to talk to them on a professional level and really focus on those issues. You're going to talk to people that believe different things than you. You're really going to look me in the eye and say you agree with everyone in your department or other departments in your hospital. You really agree with the emergency room and internal medicine all the time. It's the same thing. So you've got to be able to work regardless of what party they are. And so you have to remember the political, professional political, and the personal political are two different things, and learn how to separate that out. I'm going to stop there so we can open up for questions. I hope those stories just give you another example of, doesn't matter DR, independent, whatever you're registered as, and whatever the person is who's representing you, actually you have to look past that if you're going to represent the profession and your patients, because they're still making the decisions. So it's important to remember who they are and then what your role is. And hopefully this gives you an idea of what can be done. Thanks.
Dr. Stewart.
Dr. Kathari. I just want to say thank y'all for coming to talk at the Southwest Surgical. My comments are mainly to the audience. I think across the entire spectrum of the American College of Surgeons, I've interacted very intensely with one facet of it. The ACS is doing terrific work. And this is a really important, general time we're in is a really important and I think dangerous time for the profession. There's the rise of big money and power in medicine that actually I don't think people could have envisioned 40 years ago. The true professional approach to medicine is in danger. And I'm going to say it in pretty stark terms. The only hope from the surgery side is the American College of Surgeons. It is the only entity. I love the Southwest Surgical Congress. I love the AAST. The only entity, SAGE is the same, the only entity that can effectively address the challenges and opportunities that the next generation faces is the American College of Surgeons. And so it is incumbent to participate in the ACS, to truly participate. I mean, I've been to, I think, every meeting of the Board of Regents for the past 8 years, and I learned the stuff y'all presented. I thought it was awesome. Please participate. Please support the PAC, whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat or neither. It's really important because the politicians, pragmatically, they look at that stuff. We think it's ridiculous, I know, but they do. But the most important thing is participate in the ACS through your local chapter, through the national work, and support the ACS. When people are bashing the American College of Surgeons because they don't like that the college did this, first of all, usually they're wrong. I'm going to say usually, it's what they think the ACS did. But stand for the profession because it is in danger right now. And I thank y'all for coming.
Thanks for your comments, Dr. Stewart. Yeah, I can remember being very active in my local state chapter in Wisconsin, and one of the local legislators come to speak, and he shared that, he goes, "You don't understand the power that you have as a physician." He's like, you hate to put a ratio on it. He says, but when you pick up the phone and call or write a letter, and it says doctor on it, it's the equivalent of 10 other folks picking up the phone and making that call for that check the box. So it's actually a 10-to-1 ratio is what the influence that you have. And we certainly don't do it enough. That's for sure. Comments about that, and then comments about the, because we also hear about the PAC, and I think it's very important for you to say what you've shared, which is, and if you see, they disclose where the giving is given, and it's generally leans towards whoever is in the White House, that party, but they have to give to both sides. And we also hear, though, about the low rates towards the PAC, and that when you look at what is given by our colleagues in the legal field, it's an incredible percentage of those that give. And it's really some amazing statistics. You guys would probably know it better than myself. If every member of the American College of Surgeons gave X amount of dollars, we would have one of the largest PACs in the country. And it's really not that much that you have to give. What do we need to do from a perception standpoint? The reason they practically tithe to their PAC is because they see the value in that, because they're lawyers and they know that's how the system works. What do we need to do to help get that message about the value of donating to the PAC for the college, that this really is the economic engine that drives many of the initiatives that we need to do to get folks like you in front of said people in power?
I'll start, and then Ross, you can give a perspective as well. It gets back to, we really have got to be focused on protecting the patients and protecting our profession. And yes, you can look at the statistics on the PAC going back to, I guess it's probably been a dozen years ago that I first got involved with the PAC. And the percent giving reflects the percent of the party representation in the House and the Senate. All right. So now then it's going to lean a little bit more D, because the Ds have the House and we're split 50-50 in the Senate. If the House flips, then it's going to flip back the other way. And it's based on who the Speaker of the House is, who the majority leader is, who the whips are, who's got more sheer numbers there. And that's the way it's going to be. And those are the people that we have to be in front of to get our perspective across. We're back in another situation, somewhat like the SGR that you all remember years ago. That was with every year, it was stop the cuts at the end of the year. And so for 2020, we had that and we got everything stopped. For 2021, we got 9 down to 2. We're right back in it again. And there's a saying in Washington, years that end in odd numbers are about policy. Years that end in even numbers are about politics. And so it may shock you to know that there are only 11 legislative days for Congress between July the 29th and the midterms of November the 8th. 11 legislative days. And we are in a very, very tight window this year, especially since you realize we're going to come back to a lame duck session after the election. And sometimes folks that are defeated, they don't even come back. So we really, as we ramp up again to avoid the cuts again, we really need everybody to engage, answer the calls to action, send multiple emails. Please give to the PAC. If you've been a PAC supporter in the past, we would really appreciate having you back. If you've not been, then talk to me, talk with Ross, talk to anybody. Alan Thorson is our current PAC board chair. We're happy to have the conversation with you, but that's what we need to get in front of these folks to, again, protect our patients and protect our profession.
I want to give another story, an example of the power of a physician's voice. I'm going to go a few years back from my time in Massachusetts. This is several years ago. There was a bill that came up that wanted to give pharmacists the ability to write prescriptions. We do not need to get into details. Overall, wasn't really a fan of the physician community. So we all organized the Massachusetts Medical Society, and we were told to call your local representative the day the bill was going to be heard. We had a 45-second spiel we were going to give. So I happen to live in the speaker's district. So 9:30 in the morning, I called and I said, Dr. Goldberg, yada, 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 did my spiel. And this is pretty much the response I got. You're the 9th person to call this morning. We get it. The bill is dead. Stop calling us. It took a small percentage of physicians calling upset about something for an entire house to go, whoa, we did something wrong here. We got to stop. We have very powerful voices. They love it when you show up. If you're a resident, they really love it when you show up. When I showed up at State Houses as a resident, it was like, Christmas for them. I got asked the randomest questions over everything. I got asked about high school, frog dissections versus different things about science, because you're there, because they know we're so busy. The fact that we show up, that means something to them. Despite how they act sometimes, they actually do value what we have to say. So we have a much more powerful voice that we do not leverage enough. As far as the PAC and everything, so I was the first resident to sit on the PAC board. So I've been paying monthly since then. I pay monthly for the last 15 years. So if you're worried about giving all at once, I don't. I set it and forget it. I see a lot of coffee cups around the room. So I would challenge everyone to give us a few Starbucks a month. You don't need to start big. And I think the numbers, remember correctly, if all the eligible members of the college gave to the PAC and gave like a couple $100 a year, we would be the largest medical PAC in the history of the country. It doesn't take much. It's also getting used to doing that. You can give to candidates if you want, knock yourselves out. But the college, again, giving to the PAC is about building relationships. You're hearing us say this a lot. All this comes down to is opening the doors to build relationships. You walk into someone's office and they've never met you and you tell them to do something. Well, yes, we have powerful voices as physicians. Doing that once doesn't do anything. Every story I gave you is years of time building relationships where I have credibility because I've showed up and showed interest. And so it's important to have those conversations. The other thing I always give in my talks is I would challenge everyone in this room, go onto your calendars and put for 5 minutes a week, make a phone call. Find out who your local state representatives are, state senators, your congressmen or women and senators, and put it into your agenda every week to make a 5-minute phone call to one of those offices, rotate it around. Talk about whatever you feel like. Introduce yourself, tell them you live or work in that person's district. You want to talk to someone about X, doesn't have to be about healthcare. They keep track of this. The fact that you go from just a voice, faceless constituent to a concerned constituent, they write your name down and then all of a sudden they say, oh, it's doctor. Oh, Dr. Goldberg called me. I should call him about healthcare. I get phone calls about that from people that I don't live in their district because I've interacted with them. So again, it's about building the relationships and credibility. Having that, being a physician gives you immense power and credibility up front, and then building the relationship with the people who make the decisions. I will end with quoting a former state senator, Republican who I gave money to because I like her. She's a friend of mine, Heather Carter, former state senator. At one meeting got up and said, she could change my job with one vote. It's a very true statement. So these people have a lot of power. It's our responsibility to engage with them.
How many have been to Advocacy Day, gone and met local in Chicago, in DC? Yeah, very good. Appreciate that. They give you some great tips before you go to that. One was disheartening, which is 80% of those of those we vote into office, 80% of their time is spent raising money for their next election, and 20% of their time is actually, looking out and voting and doing things for their constituents. And the other good message I got before I got in to meet those folks was, when you meet that 23-year-old kid, as opposed to your senator, don't blow them off. They, how else do you get a $2,000 page healthcare bill? But because these are the people who wrote it, and so they actually have the ears of those folks and are actually very engaged, and you need to show respect for them. And so that was another important tip, not to talk down to these younger folks when you're there. Ronnie.
So I'm sorry to come ask another question, but so I would like to ask a non-ACS question to our advocacy team. I came here from the Texas Surgical Society, and the guest speaker was an old politician named Kent Hance. He's probably 85. I don't know how old he was, but he was hilarious. Okay. Like, he was an awesome dinner speaker. And he reminded me of a time of when we had different politicians. And he actually spoke about it. He talked about, I had difference of views with some of these people, but we wasn't personal. It wasn't personal. They're doing the same things that you tell your 14-year-olds not to do. Don't make it personal. This is in my mimicking him. And he was absolutely hilarious. I mean, there's people were laughing, and he outlined how things have come to be the way they are. There's only a handful of really truly competitive races in the country, and so you're pushed to the extremes. And he talked about that. And he talked about, things that we could do, but mainly it was entertainment. He was really, he was great at that. What can we do, if anything, what can we do as individuals to moderate this, to actually get it to where, and I do not think the good old days were good old days. Okay, I don't think that way, but I do think the ability, it's very clear to me when you walk in, for example, to the Texas legislature today, it's very different than going 20 years ago, where you could actually get them to work together pretty easily. Even if they didn't like each other, they basically work together. What can we do as individuals to moderate that?
So Ronnie, I think that's a really good question. And I think the best thing we can just do is we can just talk to each other. I have a bunch of classmates in DC who I'm much, much older than they are. And they come from a variety of spectrums and perspectives, but we all talk to each other about issues that are important in our country, and we have a conversation with each other, and I always learn from them, and I think they learn a little something from me. And what we're doing right now is, yes, we're going to the extremes. I listened in on a conference call about 6 weeks ago with the executive director for the National Democratic Redistricting Commission, who's headed by Eric Holder, former Attorney General. And then on the Republican side, National Republican Redistricting Trust, and that's headed by former Governor Christie and former Secretary of State Pompeo. And it's their assessment that out of 435 congressional seats, that there are fewer than 40 that will be competitive this cycle. And I will say, I think that's probably generous. I think the number's probably closer to 30. And some of this comes out of the fact that we've just come out of a census in 2020. The results were released late because of the pandemic. And then we've gone through a whole redistricting process after a reapportionment. So in a reapportionment, for example, California lost a seat, Montana gained a seat, Texas gained 2 seats, New York lost a seat. And then they have to redraw all this. And most of the states, the redistricting is done by the state legislatures. And what we found is that there's one party that has controlled more of the seats in that way because they have more of the state legislatures. But because of a decision the Supreme Court made about challenges to these redistricting maps, all of them now go to the state Supreme Court, not the US Supreme Court. And most state Supreme Courts are controlled by the other party. So there's a lot of yin and yang here, but the end result is, yes, there are very few competitive seats. We're getting pushed more to the extreme. So my challenge is to you all when you go home to have conversations with people that don't agree with you, because we all agree on a lot more than we disagree on. And you just got to have a pragmatic, and I don't want to get too
Please do.
off in the air here. We got a problem in this country, and we've got to be able to get along with each other a little bit better and have conversations about distressing, tenuous, big problems. Because if we don't, then it's a downhill. And so I just encourage everyone to have conversation with those they don't agree with and try to learn how to meet in the middle a little bit.
We need more physicians running for office.
That was my next question.
I mean, I'm not kidding. I say that, I don't mean that tongue in cheek. We have a different mindset, I feel, on how we approach things. It's just, we're busy taking care of patients and don't want to give that up. But I think we need to have people that understand what we go through, making those decisions. And the way you do that is you engage the system. It's not a great system, but we can fix it, but it has to be fixed from the inside. And so I would encourage, if you don't want to run, at least engage in the process. That's the first step. It's not just a conversation. I would take the next step further is engaging on some level, low level, something, because the more knowledgeable you are and the more influence you have is how you make change. We all gave examples of that. So honestly, it is engaging a process that we look at that a little differently, right? Like I always joke when I give a talk saying if I did a Whipple, the way Congress does things, all my patients would have been dead a long time ago, right? Because a Whipple would have taken 10 years, the way Congress does things, but we have to engage in that process. So I think not just the conversation, but it's the engagement, and in getting outside of our comfort zone is the only way we're going to fix this. Stop paying attention to social media and really start talking to one another again is the way to do it.
Thank you. Final question, Dr. Dent.
Thank you all for your thoughts here. I have a question / suggestion. As I participated in the college's advocacy day, got to meet the senator's aide, some congressman aides. A relationship developed, like you suggested, with the aide of my representative back in San Antonio. And to the point where we were emailing back and forth about some issues when there were things, he would reach out to me. He and the congressman are no longer in that office, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside. I don't even know who my representative is right now. But what I think might be helpful to people in the audience and to the college and our process is help facilitate the transition from, you spent a Tuesday on the Hill meeting some people. Obviously, this is when we can meet with them in person, maybe going forward, but you spent some time meeting with some people. How can we set up an appointment for you back home in your district and facilitate that? Because those who show up for Advocacy Day are interested and committed to doing something, But I think if the college could help facilitate developing those transitions to relationships back home, most of us are not resistant to that. It's just, you know, we need a little nudge and a little shove to make that sort of thing happen. And I wonder if the college could facilitate that sort of thing.
So Dan, that's a great point. And we have actually for the summertime, mostly for August, you know, I said there's 11 legislative days from July 29th to the midterm. Congress has taken August off for centuries, literally, okay? Because Washington's not real pleasant in August and they didn't always have air conditioning, okay? But we have Advocacy at Home program that is set up for that period of time, specifically through Katie Oman in our office, will help you to go through a step-by-step process to get a meeting in district. And so that you can continue to build that relationship and to follow up on those conversations. And it's really the in-district people, quite frankly, that I have more contact with now than I do the people in my representative's office in Washington. The other point that I'll make to you, what you were saying about don't be offended when it's the 23-year-old. Okay. So one of my classmates in DC, I was watching a C-SPAN hearing from the Energy and Commerce Committee last week. And here was Harry up on the dais back behind. And I texted one of my classmates. I said, what's Harry doing? Well, Harry is now counsel for the Oversight Committee of Energy and Commerce. Okay. Harry's about 28, 29 years old. So he's got a lot of say in what his folks on his side of the aisle and that subcommittee on energy and commerce are going to think. So if you had a meeting with that kind of a person, don't think at all that they are the eyes and ears. And more often than not, those members are going to follow their advice and follow their lead.
Yeah, again, we actually, the Advocate Home program, we've made it really easy. It takes a couple of emails usually to set up a meeting, and they're much more robust meetings because they're not going anywhere. So you'll meet with your member more likely actually at home or the office. An example, again, years ago, I'm sure you remember this one. I work at the county hospital. We were doing a proposition to build a new hospital. Using the American College of Surgeons, I set up a meeting with Senator Flake at the time. Senator Flake, the name may sound familiar. It took 2 emails. This was several years ago. I sent an email, we sent a follow-up email, great. An hour later, I get an email from the leadership of my hospital because they'd been trying for 2 months to get in with Senator Flake and couldn't, and want to know, they heard I have a meeting now, can they come along with me? So the ability for us through the college to have these kind of meetings is actually pretty easy. By the way, I told them politely, no, I did their stuff for them, but that was a separate meeting, so I didn't bring the hospital along. But again, shows you the ability. It doesn't take much. They know, and once they know you, and again, you started with, I met, Congressman, I was in the office in DC just recently. I want to follow up. It takes an email or two. It actually is really easy to do. Katie's great at it. We have contacts everywhere. We try to make it as easy as possible, and you can even do it via Zoom now. If you really want to do it locally, and they really can't go anywhere if it's on Zoom, because that's really awkward if they do that. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. So it's a great question because there are programs out there that can do this. We just got to utilize them.
Great comments, great discussion. Thank you all what you do on behalf of for our surgeons with the ACS. Thank you all.